Hello. I'd like to welcome Danny Sugerman and Nicholas Black, LA correspondent. Welcome, guys.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello down there, as we say.
Yeah. How's things in LA?
How's things in L.A.? Well, this El Nino, we thought it was a joke for a while, and then it started sending storms our way, and we're sitting up in the Hollywood Hills now, and we're holding on okay, but it's real wet. It's real green in the hillsides around us.
Yeah. It's pretty similar here, except we've got a lot more smog.
You guys have all kinds of weather down there, don't you?
Yeah, it's very temperamental, the Melbourne weather, actually, the Melbourne weather scene. As too as the music scene here, very varied. Yeah, it's a pleasure to speak to you, Danny.
It's nice to be on the air with you.
I believe Nick has got a few things to talk about with you.
Yep, okay. Shall I start now, Tim?
Yeah, go for it, Nick.
Okay. All right. Well, as you heard, I've got Danny Sugerman here in his beautiful Hollywood home, and we've got a fantastic view out there. First thing I want to ask Danny is, how did you become associated with the Doors, especially since you were so young at the time, Danny?
A baseball umpire. I played Little League, just like a lot of kids that grow up in Los Angeles, and this baseball umpire lived next door to a guy named Robbie Krieger, and because he had a VW van, he carried their equipment to gigs. This was before Light My Fire came out, but after they had recorded their first album. And let me get rid of this phone call. This is what happens when you do it at home.
Hey, Tim.
Okay.
Yeah, Nick. Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
He said to me during an all-star game, if you hit a home run, I'll take you to see that band whose equipment you've been asking me about. And I hit a home run, and he took me to see the Doors in concert, and it changed my life. It was like the finger of God came down and said, "You're not going in that direction, you're going over here."
So it was purely luck that you just happened to be playing that baseball game, and
it was either luck or destiny. I'm not sure why.
And how was Jim Morrison to you? Because you were, just a young lad, and apparently, he was a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde character.
Well, at first he ignored me, and then one day he sort of cocked his head to one side like he was going to, knock my head off my shoulders. And he said, I keep seeing you around everywhere I go. Who are you? And, I told him, he said, "Oh, you're the guy that whacked our roadie in the knee with a baseball bat when he called you out on strikes." And I said, "Who told you that?" And we struck up a conversation, and from there on out, he was very kind and social, and later on, even took an interest in, in my career.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was going to do when I was going to grow up, except I wanted to do it in the rock and roll business, and I told him my family didn't approve of that, and he said, encouraged me to follow my heart, follow my dreams, and...
So did he get you working?
Yeah, the manager of the Doors office, and it wasn't your standard office. After Strange Days, their second album came out, and just before they started recording Waiting for the Sun, their third, they got an office. It was actually an antique shop. It had...
Is that the Benvenuto Cafe now?
Yeah, exactly. It's a coffee shop now, a two-story coffee shop. It used to be an antique shop, and it's on Antique Row on La Cienega, a very chic area. And it was set back from the street, and there was a wall in front of it, and it even said Antiques on the top, and Jim took a can of brown spray paint and sprayed that through, and that was their office. They rehearsed downstairs, and upstairs the business was done, and there were 3 desks in the outer office, and one was for Jim, and Jim shared his desk with me, and I had the bottom drawer for the fan mail. I was thrown out of the office one day by the manager. He said I was hanging around too much, and Jim saw me sitting outside crying. I was about 14 years old actually by now, and he said, "What's the matter? Who died?" And I said, "No one died. Your manager threw me out." He said, "I got in the way." And he said, "He can't do that. he works for me. He said, don't go anywhere, wait here. And he went up and talked to the manager and called me up to come back, and I sheepishly went back up the stairs to the offices, and there was about 5 bags, paper bags full of mail. And Jim said, we were thinking about handling this professional service that answers fan mail. I don't have the time to do it. And you seem to know everything about us. And you're a fan. How'd you like to take care of it? I said, I'd love to.
Did they offer money, Danny?
No, they didn't.
No.
They didn't. Jim said, don't you want to know how much you're getting paid? And I said, no, I don't care. Just hanging out was enough. As it turned out, I got 10 cents a letter.
Wow.
And I could take all the love beads, as we used to call them. They used to get hundreds of love beads, and I could sell them at a head shop a couple of miles away for $1.50 a piece. So that was a real good deal. And he did make me take typing in high school.
Oh,
because
right.
my handwriting was really good. When I got to high school, he insisted I take typing, and I was the only guy, in the typing class, and I caught a lot of embarrassment and a lot of criticism and a lot of kidding from other guys in school for taking typing. How's typing, Sugerman? Going to be a secretary when you grow up. I told him I was going to be a writer, and they didn't believe me. But Jim told me I had a way with words, and I should think about being a writer.
Yeah. So what sort of people did you come across in the office there, Danny? I mean, you would have come across some very interesting people.
The Doors attract, for the most part, a very intelligent audience.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, a college audience, a lot of what we used to call heads, people who got high and were really into them as they got more successful around. After Waiting for the Sun and Soft Parade, they started to attract some real lunatics, who thought their songs were being written directly for them, and, they were...
Sounds like today's band.
And it still exists. It's one of the reasons why, we don't have an office anymore with our address on it, because we'd be bombarded with people who belong to what Jim himself called the lunatic fringe, people who just would not leave you alone. And, it wasn't enough, to say hi, hello, and, well, thank you for being a fan, and it's nice to meet you, and I'll sign that, and, nice meeting you, and go on your way. There are people, that want to move in and think, you owe them something because they bought your record.
Right.
And, I mean, some dangerous people, too. I mean, once somebody came by when my address was published. I had been out of town for a month, and they had actually moved into my condominium, and it was right after No One Here Gets Out Alive came out, and they were wearing leather pants. It turned out the guy had killed his brother, stole his car, killed the gas station attendant in Texas, and then took the door off my hinges where I lived, and had moved in, and was going through my file cabinets and reading all my Doors files, and had this big stack of cocaine and marijuana when I came in. And I walked in and thought, oh, God, you want to play Morrison too? Well, get in line, because the movie, there was so much talk of a Doors movie for so long after the book came out, and then when everyone gave up on it, then along came Oliver Stone. But there have been some interesting people. I wrote about some in a book called Wonderland Avenue. There was Crazy Nancy Ann Morrison, who thought she was married to Jim in a previous incarnation.
Right.
And she once held a letter opener at my testicles for about 45 minutes.
What made her do that, Daddy?
She wanted to talk to Jim, who had called on the telephone, and I said to Jim, "You got to talk to her. She's got a knife at my nuts." And Jim said, "Well, you can handle it. That's part of working with a rock and roll band."
Right.
Jim, come on. Jim hung up, and she goes, and she was really pissed that I won't put her on the phone with him, and she moved it up to my neck and held me there until somebody walked in who worked there, and he took her into the back office, and I don't know what happened back there, but at least I was safe.
Oh, dear. Oh, well.
But most of the fans, are very intelligent and sensitive, and really relate to the music and the lyrics that Jim wrote.
Exactly.
The sense of despair and loneliness and feeling strange and apart from and isolated, and something's wrong, something's not quite right in this world and your place in it. And Jim really touched a nerve which continues to appeal to generation after generation, while the music continues to appeal to the older generation.
Exactly, like us.
Yeah.
Danny, I just want to go on to when, do you remember when you first heard of his death, and how did it affect you? Because you were quite young.
Yeah.
And obviously you looked up to him, and he was like a mentor too, wasn't he?
Yeah. It spun my world upside down.
Was it the first person who died that you knew about? Yeah.
Yeah, it was the first person I knew who had died, and I wasn't sure it wasn't a publicity trick, but I knew, Jim had told me before he left that if he didn't come back from Paris, he said, a cat has 7 lives, that trip. I said, he said, well, if I don't come back from Paris, it means, I've run out of lives. That fall, he had fallen out of the window at the Chateau Marmont and bounced off the overhang and onto the roof of a convertible car and landed on his feet, and it had punctured his left lung, which is what contributed to his death.
Right.
He was coughing up blood, and he wouldn't go see a doctor.
Was he on a death wish or what? It just took.
I don't think he was on a death wish so much as he just was a very daring person. He was a daredevil. He was a risk taker. He liked it. I mean, I started "No One Here Gets Out Alive" with his quote. I was just testing the bounds of reality. I was curious to see what would happen. And when he died, my reaction to his death wasn't to say, "Gee, drinking and drugging like Jim did can kill you. I better cool it," because by then I had started behaving like him, and my reaction was to behave just like him, and to try and kill myself with, alcohol and drugs too. Unfortunately, I was in better shape than Jim.
Right, and luckily that didn't work.
and survived. Jim was not in good shape when he was 27 years old and went to Paris. He was, the coroner estimated his age at 57 years old.
Wow, sounds like when Errol Flynn died.
Yes, exactly. He packed 30 years of living into that 4 or 5 year span in the spotlight.
Right.
And he was, his stage behavior was no act. I mean, that was Jim. Jim was, pedal to the metal 24 hours a day.
Right.
Which isn't to say they didn't have, his quiet moments. I remember once when I had to go out and find him for a rehearsal, and I went to the bars, and he wasn't in any of the bars, and I went to Pam's place, and no one was there, and I went back to the bars to see if he was there, and the bartender said something about going to the library, and I found him at Beverly Hills Library, just sitting and reading with a big stack of books by him about the Mayan Indians.
Oh, right.
And that Jim Morrison didn't get much attention in Oliver Stone's movie, but he was the best read, most intelligent, as well as charismatic man that I ever met.
Yeah, well, they said he had a book full of rooms, and you could take out a book without him looking, and
he had a photographic memory.
Yeah, exactly.
And he also had a thirst for knowledge. The way he got me interested in poetry, because when he first told me he gave me a book of poetry he had written, and he wanted me to send it to fans that sent him poetry. It was an American prayer, and he could tell by my reaction. It was like, poetry?
Yeah.
And he said, no, man. And he immediately went to the bookstore, I guess the next day, because he gave me an autobiography on Arthur Rimbaud and on William Blake to read. And then when I was done with those, then he gave me their poetry.
He turned you on. Yeah, he turned you on.
It hooked me. And he said, these are my heroes, and
check them out.
It's not what you think it is. And I read them, and it really turned me on. And then I read his poetry, which I thought was better than any of theirs. And I just thought, Jim's a genius.
So Danny, after Jim died, what did you do? I mean,
I didn't know how to express my grief. I really didn't. My father was not sympathetic. I had run away from home and had been living in a hotel near the Doors office when I was 16 years old when he died. And when I went to the office, and Bill Siddons their manager, had been to Paris and was back and said, it's true, I had to go home. And my father, would only let me in if I was done with that Morrison crap, And
he was a bad influence to him, obviously.
And I said, Jim's dead. And he said, well, what did you expect? He was an alcoholic, and... I had to swallow my tears, and it came out later when I got a chance to write No One Here Gets Out Alive, which infuriated my father. It was like, Morrison again, he's been dead for 5 years.
Wait, it didn't matter that it was a roaring success?
When it became successful, then he called and said, I was wrong, I was a schmuck,
right.
You were right, I tried to stop you at every turn you tried to make, and you did it on your own, and I'm so proud of you. And, he really came around.
Excellent,
but,
well, how did you become involved with No One He Gets Out Alive? Because apparently Jerry Hopkins was trying...
Right, Jerry Hopkins wrote it for Simon & Schuster. They read it and said, we're not interested. We think Jim Morrison's time has come and gone. And his agent tried 30 more publishers, and nobody wanted it. And Jerry called me. He called everybody he interviewed for the book and said, I'm putting it in my closet with my other unpublished manuscripts, and I'm getting on with my life. And I said, you can't. By this time I had gone in the garment business and was working for a company my father had invested in and doing really well in it. And when I heard the book wasn't going to be published, I took it really personally. To me, it meant that I didn't know, excuse my language, my ass from my face, because I thought Jim Morrison was the greatest thing that I had ever witnessed. And for him to be forgotten and for people not to want to read a book on him, I thought was just insane. So I asked Jerry if I could try writing it and rewriting it. And he said, you can do whatever you want with it. And he sent me the manuscript, and it was really well researched, but it wasn't exciting. And being with Jim was really exciting.
Right, because he didn't have much first-hand knowledge of Jim. He just interviewed him.
And I wanted it to read like Jim, like being with Jim, and as a result, Jim came out, I guess, a little callous and a little alcoholic in the book, but...
it's a great read still, though.
He had put me... Jerry had put me in under my own name, and I changed my name to Denny Sullivan.
Why did you do that?
Well, when the Doors were around, when magazines would give their records bad reviews, I'd write them letters, which would get printed with my name, Danny Sugerman, and criticizing their reviews, and defending the Doors. And their manager pointed out to me that I was losing credibility, by writing to same magazines over and over again. So I still wanted them to know I didn't intend to stop writing the letters. I just changed my name to Denny Sullivan because I wanted them to know it was me, So I decided to use that. I thought, I didn't know the book was going to sell 2 million copies and everyone was going to go, oh, you wrote yourself into the book, all that. But they were the only examples of Jim being kind to somebody.
Right.
And it was really important to me that be seen. So I just left that in.
Yeah.
actually I took out, there was more of it. The book was much longer than it was.
Right. So is there a director's cut coming out, an author's cut?
No, we just did a revised edition, where I finally got to write an introduction that I think does Jim justice.
Right.
And Jerry wrote an epilogue, and we put like 20 new photos in it.
And is this coming out?
It's out.
Oh, it's out already?
It's out,
right.
yeah. It came out last summer.
Oh, okay,
and so there's a revised edition, and then one here gets out alive out there.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk about Wonderland Avenue. Now, this was a very... I'd imagine this was a very painful book to write. Can you... well, why did you write it in the first place? I mean, was it to relieve some of the pain?
It was. I wanted to write a rock and roll coming-of-age novel.
Right.
And I tried to novelize it about... I wanted to tell the story of rock and roll, a kid and a rock star, and drug addiction. Because...
they all go together.
Because, they went together for me. And for a lot of people I knew, drugs and rock and roll. And I couldn't... I mean, it was so obviously Jim, it was so obviously me, and so obviously Iggy, that finally I just, as soon as I started writing in the first person, it started flowing, and I found my writing voice, and I did it because I wanted to be a writer. And Jim told me, you write what you know.
Exactly.
And what I knew was what had happened to me.
Yeah.
And enough people encouraged me to. I had, by this time, a literary agent. The same one who couldn't sell No One Here Gets Out Alive came to me and said, how did you do this? And congratulations, because I couldn't do it, and great rewrite. And a lot of people gave Jerry the credit for the book. He got good reviews, Jerry got the credit. Got bad reviews, I got the credit.
How did Jerry get the credit?
Because he was a founding father of Rolling Stone, and he was 40 years old, and he had interviewed Jim for the cover of Rolling Stone, and he gathered all the facts and researched it, and I just sort of put the spin on it, and called Jim a god in the introduction, and had no objectivity whatsoever, and so I took a lot of flack, and I really wanted to prove to people, that I was a writer, and I knew how to write, and that I had changed the book significantly. Yeah. And I wanted to write another book about rock and roll.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a rock and roll writer. And I thought Lester Bangs or Cameron Crowe would write the great coming-of-age rock and roll story, but they didn't.
No.
Cameron did Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which I thought was it's funny, but it was a sort of lame book about going to high school. Cameron graduated high school early and never went to the 11th and 12th grade. But he went right to college, so it was his opportunity to do that. And so I did it. And it did real well. Yeah. Glad I did it.
Well, Fast Times got made into a movie. Now, what about Wonderland Avenue? Especially with the success of Boogie Nights and,
Right. Wonderland Avenue has been optioned about 8 times, including Oliver Stone bought it when he bought No One Here Gets Out Alive, and he tried to make it into a movie, but the script was so bad I wouldn't let it be made.
Oh, right.
Because
good idea.
it did not show Jim as the caring human being with a great sense of humor that I knew.
Right.
And the title was changed to Wild Child because there's rumors that Jim wrote Wild Child about me. Or at least the first verse or two.
Right. Wild child, terrible child.
Not your mother's or your father's child. And I don't know if that's true or not. I heard that it was, and that Pam heard he was writing a song about me, and he said, "Oh no, it's about you, honey," and changed the last, and then wrote the last 2 verses about her. So we'll never know. But anyway, it was a horrible script. It wasn't true to the spirit of the book, and I wasn't going to see Jim fucked, excuse my language, again by Oliver Stone. So it's been optioned several times since. It was just optioned again, which means that
it's still in the system.
Still in the system, and one of these days, I'm sure there will be a movie.
Will you be involved in it at all?
Oh yeah, sure,
right,
sure. And as soon as I'm done with what I'm doing. I work on a follow-up to Wonderland Avenue.
Oh, right. Wonderland Avenue 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Call it Loaded. A consumer guide to detox.
Yeah.
Something like
Right.
that.
Now, tell us about the Guns N' Roses book, Danny. What made you, why did you choose them?
Again,
Yeah.
a publisher came to me and offered me a lot of money to write a book about anything I wanted, and I said, there's no one out there that I find interesting except Guns N' Roses. And they only had one album out at the time, but I found them fascinating.
Were they...
The way they flaunted this outlaw image. And it was an opportunity for me to use the information from the books Jim, had given me on his reading list, to read Carl Jung and Nietzsche and The Way of the Shaman and about music and drugs and rhythm and all of that. And what I set out to do was to write a literary appreciation critique / biography. And the publisher sold it as a biography, and it's not. It's a literary critique appreciation that also contains, their biography.
Right.
And
what is it?
I wrote it simply because I wanted to write again,
Yeah.
and there was nothing to write about.
Right.
You
Well,
know?
what did the band think of the book?
Axl loved it. I heard Slash, because he wasn't in it enough, wasn't crazy about it. I know Matt liked it, and Stephen liked it,
Yeah.
and Duff liked it.
Right.
I've talked to Duff, and he liked it a lot. It was a very highbrow approach to a very lowbrow group, and it was sort of the college thesis I never got a chance to write about drugs and music, and Guns N' Roses was just happened to be the vehicle that I chose, because it was really phenomenal watching them come up from L.A. I was managing a group called the Joneses, like when you're jonesing from Smack, and Guns N' Roses would open for them, and these guys would show up like after the Joneses were already on stage, so they'd have to be the headliners. It wasn't intentional, but they were out scoring, and sick and couldn't get on stage until they were fixed, and to see them pull themselves together and enough to do that album just really blew me away. And I just intuitively knew that their next album was going to be huge, and as it turned out, I was spot on, as they say in England. Use Your
And in
Illusion.
Australia, yeah.
1 and 2 was huge, and the book came out about 6 months before it.
Yep.
Which then that book became a bestseller. But I took a lot of flack because people thought it was a biography,
Right.
and I still haven't been able to get it sold correctly as a literary appreciation critique.
Right. Right, Tim. Well, I know we're running out of time. I just want to ask Danny what he's doing now, and we'll call it the end. Okay, Tim?
That sounds great, Nick. Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah,
Danny,
fire away.
Finally,
Yeah.
what are you up to now?
About 15, 17 years ago, Ray and I worked with a band X and had great success with it. What no one knows was a couple of years before that, we saw a band called The Knack, and I wanted to manage them, and Ray wanted to produce them, but they became so big, so fast, they just wanted a yes man, basically, and they wanted Mike Chapman as a producer who did Suzi Quatro and Sweet, and was the right producer for them. And Doug Feiger and I became friends a couple of years ago, and he wanted me to work with him, and I said only if he reformed the Knack. And we got rid of the drummer and got Terry Bozzio, who's one of the best drummers in the world, and they've made an album, and I got them a record contract with Rhino Records. So there's the Best of the Knack coming out May 15th, and there's a new album coming out, and I guarantee that this is the best Knack album that they've ever made. I just heard it for the first time. They finished it about a week ago. I just heard it the first time the day before yesterday, and I couldn't believe how great it was. I mean, it's the most danceable, upbeat record. I mean, if you're a Doors fan, you might not like it, but if you're a rock and roll fan and you like great, upbeat, danceable radio music, boy, It's called Zoom, and it's coming out July 15th, and I'm just amazed.
Well, yeah. Well, we're looking forward to it. And I heard a track, Tim, and it's very, very catchy. And if radio picks it up, it'll be huge.
That sounds great, actually. I've just got a quick question to ask Danny myself.
Yep. Go ahead, Tim.
Danny, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Yeah. Thanks. In your Morrison biography, No One Gets Out of Here Alive, you described how identifying with Jim meant you were an outsider looking in. Did you find you could connect with him, or was he always like on another level, always wasted?
No, I connected with him fine. I was an outsider too. I said my brother was going to be a doctor, my sister was going to be a lawyer, and I was like the black sheep in the family, so I was the outsider in my family. And I think in the 60s, the hippies were just a bunch of outsiders coming together and becoming one. Jim was one of our leaders. Jim was the ultimate outsider and expressed the feelings of an outsider.
Yeah, so that was the bond, really, wasn't it? Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I mean, it's amazing you found such a figure to follow at the time.
It is. And Jim continues to inform my existence every day. Every day I find myself asking, what would Jim have wanted? What would Jim have said?
Yep. Obviously, he lived for the moment. He certainly had an interesting philosophy. He was well read, wasn't he?
Extremely. The best read person I've met to this day.
Yeah.
But, Tim, Danny comes close because his home is full of books.
Yeah.
Hunter S. Thompson, and he's got the Arthur Rimbaud, and he's got everything. The Henry Rollins book,
Allen Ginsberg,
John Cocteau.
Yeah.
So you're following in the tradition there, Danny.
Yeah, I have endeavored as Jim's spokesperson, official spokesperson, to read as many books as I can that Jim read, and I think I'm getting close.
Well,
I'm getting close.
It seems like it. All right, Tim. Well, we better go now, yeah?
Yeah, no worries, Nick. We really appreciate this.
All right. Well, I just want to thank Danny for taking time out of his schedule to be with us.
Yeah, thanks.
My pleasure. I've been down there. It's a great area, and Ray Manzarek and I were there about 2 years ago, and we had a great time.
Oh, yeah.
There you go, Tim.
You should visit again. You've always got a place to stay here with Nick, all right?
Will do.
Yep, no worries. Thanks very much, guys.
All right, Tim. Next week, Regina King, the actress from Jerry Maguire.
That sounds fantastic. Yep.
All right then, Tim. All the best.
Okay, Nick and Danny, I'll see you later.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
See ya.